Inside the Galactic Records Department, the most esteemed, if absurdly bureaucratic organization in the entire Andromeda Galaxy, there was a dizzying swirl of holographic data that filled the air like a cosmic ballet. Everyone who worked there prided themselves on meticulousness, from the overburdened archivists to the dour receptionists who had long since surrendered any hope of joy in life. They meticulously cataloged every instance of a natural disaster on every inhabited planet in known space, a mind-numbing pursuit that involved referencing thousands of cross-galactic standards. If a planet sneezed, geologically speaking, someone at the department had a 3-inch thick report to file about it. Yet for all their beloved thoroughness, they had just discovered the single most confounding anomaly in their multimillennial history: Earth. By all accounts, Earth should have been teeming with natural disasters. The planet's data, tectonic plates, atmospheric volatility, seasonal storms, oceanic phenomena, practically begged for a laundry list of earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, you name it. And yet the official record contained precisely 0 incidents. There was not even a footnote. This shocking revelation had sparked a kind of panic within the department's labyrinthine hierarchy. Committees were formed, subcommittees proliferated, working groups spawned around the clock, all to decipher how such a glaring omission could possibly exist. A voice that seemed to carry centuries of resigned frustration echoed through the main hallway. Disaster Records Division, please hold your existential dread until after filing Form K7B. The receptionist did not even glance up from the shimmering console of requests. On the far side of the building, in a chamber-lined floor to ceiling with floating data tablets, the newly assigned investigative team huddled around a shared display. Each of them wore the official department insignia, which was the shape of a cosmic swirl superimposed upon a mountain of stacked paperwork. That insignia was the closest they came to unity, because each of them specialized in a different branch of knowledge and approach. Lead investigator Nrop had a posture as upright as a statue and bore the expression of one perpetually waiting for others to follow regulations. Geological specialist VA, a multi-limbed being who identified rock types by taste, was fussing over a chunk of Earth's mantle data. Atmospheric expert Laws, hailing from a planet engulfed in permanent hypercanes, kept making hissing noises that might have been laughter or concern. And cultural interpreter Hex was a luminescent creature whose skin patterns shifted in response to emotional states, though in this very moment, those patterns flickered with pure bewilderment. Rob tried to sound composed. We have a gap in the records for Earth. A total absence of anything we categorize as a natural disaster. Nrop pointed a pointer stick. This department was old-fashioned at a holographic globe of the small blue-green planet. Based on these topographical, geological, and atmospheric characteristics, Earth should average at least 17 recorded disasters per century, minimum. The ocean coverage alone, VA muttered, means hurricanes, tropical cyclones, should be unbelievably frequent. And the planet has a molten core, for nebula's sake. No recorded volcanic eruptions? Unthinkable. Laws chimed in, arching one tentacled limb. I saw data from Earth's star system. They're positioned in a region with constant meteor showers. Not a single recorded strike. I find that borderline insulting to cosmic probabilities. Hex's skin glowed in agitated patterns. There must be some mistake. The department could not fail for thousands of years unless Earth never submitted reports. Or perhaps humans never recognized these events as disasters. At that heresy, the others exchanged skeptical looks, and Nrop refused to consider it. Preposterous. A disaster is a disaster. There's a definition. Standard 947b clearly states any planet-wide or region-wide event that exceeds the baseline adaptive capacity is categorized as a natural disaster. Earth either has them and didn't file, or we have a clerical error. My money's on a clerical error. News of Earth's anomaly traveled fast through the department's corridors. Senior staff convened in something called the Anomaly Resolution Chamber. That gathering was an odd spectacle. Gelatinous beings, multi-limbed crustaceans, gaseous floaters, all pressed around glowing data displays. Director Quirt, whose body looked like a translucent bag of swirling jelly, presided. "We have a list of theories," Quirt announced, voice quivering like gelatin left in the sun. "Clerical error is one. Divine protection by a cosmic entity is another. Possibly the humans developed technology to suppress all disasters. Or maybe Earth simply does not exist and we're hallucinating." That last suggestion caused exasperated sighs from half the room. "We have conclusive evidence Earth exists," said someone at the back. "We visited it for anthropological studies. They have a civilization." This sparked a wave of confusion. So, how can they not have a single event that meets the definition of disaster in over 12,000 years? The hush that followed felt electric. Director Quirt wobbled forward with an air of finality. "We must send an investigative team to confirm on the ground." "Enough speculation. I'm authorizing an expedition. You'll all have to fill out the proper forms, of course." A flurry of stamping, signing, and digital form submissions ensued. Within days, an absurdly short time in departmental terms, a specialized unit was assembled. Every member was chosen not just for their technical expertise, but for their willingness to immerse themselves in what the department now suspected might be a bizarre or anomalous planet. ROP, VA, Laz, and Hex collectively boarded a modest vessel disguised, thanks to hilariously outdated Earth intel, as a large silver balloon apparently labeled science stuff. One of the comedic highlights was the single phrase painted in what the cultural department insisted was authentic human handwriting. Hex practiced a few Earth languages, fixating on something called Finnish, which according to intelligence was so obscure outside Finland that it would provide a nearly impenetrable cover. "We just keep referencing saunas and Nokia phones if pressed," Hex said, with a note of desperation in their voice. "That's how we maintain our cover." Upon entering Earth's atmosphere, the ship flickered and sputtered with disguised thrusters. The heat outside was intense, but not extraordinary by cosmic standards. What caught them off guard was the planet's dynamic weather patterns. They flew through swirling cloud formations that quickly changed color and shape, a phenomenon that would send half the Federation's meteorological observers into hysterics. "These atmospheric fronts are colliding at alarming rates," Laz reported, scanning data. "For a planet that supposedly has zero record of storms, this place looks primed for catastrophic weather." A few minutes later, they landed in a place called Florida, according to their database, a coastal region with a climate so volatile it should have been uninhabitable. "But it's teeming with human life," VA observed, pressing 6 appendages against her sensors. "I see entire cities, skyscrapers, suburban sprawl, roads jammed with vehicles. They live here willingly." Nrop's exoskeleton stiffened, as though bracing for the incomprehensible. "They must be oblivious to the risks," he decided, half to reassure himself. The moment the team stepped out, disguised in outlandish Earth attire that the infiltration manual insisted was a typical tourist uniform, they nearly collided with a group of local residents boarding up windows. The sky overhead was dark, churning with ominous clouds. The winds gusted in sharp bursts that ruffled clothing and whipped stray debris into the air. "Ah, so they do have some sense," Laz whispered, expecting panic, chaos, or at the very least frantic evacuation. Instead, to the team's astonishment, these humans just carried on with calm efficiency, hammering boards over windows while chatting about weekend plans. One paused to call out to them, "Y'all getting ready for the hurricane?" Rop froze, stunned, before mumbling an improvised response. "We are from Finland. Studying your weather." "Hurricane." The human smirked, nodded sagely, then turned back to his tasks. "Should be a Category 3 by landfall. Not the worst we've seen." This offhand comment left the investigative team reeling. Category 3. That was a level of storm that on most Federation worlds merited immediate planetary evacuation or at least mandatory sheltering in specialized bunkers. Here, the locals used a casual tone about it. "Surely they'll flee," VA whispered. "That storm is dangerous." But as the hours ticked by, They realized many simply stocked up on supplies, reinforced their houses, and continued life with no more excitement than preparing for a mildly inconvenient event. Even more confounding were rumors of hurricane parties, which turned out to be gatherings where neighbors socialized and drank while awaiting the storm's arrival. Laws spluttered in disbelief. They treat the swirling meteorological menace as an excuse for socializing? Are we certain we landed on the correct planet? The storm eventually struck with howling winds that tore at rooftops and snapped tree branches. Rain pelted everything in sight, flooding streets. The research team braced for the kind of devastation that would fill entire chapters of the department's archives. But as soon as it passed, the clouds cleared, rescue crews and cleanup units swung into action, and within a day or two, many places looked almost normal again. Neighbors gathered to clear debris. Some folks even shared jokes about losing electricity for a few hours. No big deal, one local told them. Not like the big ones we had years ago. Big ones? That storm, from the team's perspective, was monstrous. Yet the locals brushed it off as though it had been a mere inconvenience. For a department used to labeling a minor quake on a deserted moon as a Category 4 planetary event, this was impossible to square with the official definition of a disaster. Nrop filled nearly 100 pages of notes on the incongruity between human experiences and galactic definitions. He was almost certain the department's system had glitched, except that every living human they encountered shared this same blasé outlook on what the department would classify as cataclysmic. Determined to confirm this bizarre pattern, the team moved on to a region known as California, famously riddled with seismic fault lines. Earthquakes there, they reasoned, would surely qualify as a documented disaster. If a planet was prone to routine ground-shaking events that could topple structures, it had to be in the database, unless someone failed to file. So they positioned themselves in a suburban area crisscrossed by active faults, scanning for tectonic unrest. Within days, they got their wish. A quake rattled the region. To them, the event was jarring. Buildings wobbled, car alarms shrieked, and the team members attempted to contact local authorities, expecting mass panic. Instead, they found calm radio chatter and residents calmly checking if everyone was all right. A few structures were damaged, but people seemed collectively unfazed. That was about a 5.2, a local seismologist said, sipping coffee in a half-lit office. We've had worse. The word worse echoed in VA's auditory canals long after the trembling stopped. This was apparently normal for humans. They would absolutely face more quakes, some stronger, some weaker, but they neither left en masse nor declared a planet-wide emergency. They built structures to code, joked about earthquake weather, and carried on. Their notion of normal functioning includes a measure of periodic ground movement, VA said that evening, her voice a near whisper of astonishment. They're prepared to some extent, and they adapt. Tornado Alley provided yet another perplexing puzzle. The team ventured out by land in a borrowed vehicle, some awkward truck plastered with the words "Storm Chasers," which they assumed would be an inconspicuous cover. They discovered that locals here actually chase tornadoes for research or, more shockingly, for entertainment. The funnel clouds that touched down looked to the investigators like swirling pillars of certain doom. People on most other civilized planets would race in the opposite direction, but some humans quite literally drove after them. We have storm shelters, one family explained kindly when the team tried to caution them that a funnel cloud was spotted just kilometers away. We'll just go underground if it heads toward us. Last year, we had 3 big ones. We rebuilt part of the barn, but otherwise it was fine. Nrop meticulously noted every detail: the calm acceptance, the resiliency, the utter lack of existential dread. Instead of calling it a cosmic horror or planetary fury, the humans talked about how quickly they could restore phone lines or patch a hole in the roof. It was as if something was deeply broken in the universal logic that massive weather events equals disasters. Or maybe Earth's inhabitants simply marched to a different logic altogether. By now, the team's official data logs were overflowing. They compiled hours of footage of violent storms, photo evidence of property damage from hurricanes, witness statements about destructive earthquakes, entire archives of localized flooding incidents, volcanic eruptions in certain regions. Every single case should have triggered an entry in the department's official catalog. And yet, in practice, the threshold for disaster seemed never to be met, at least not in a way that humans would collectively scream for off-world help or declare a world-shaking emergency. In places plagued by seasonal monsoons, floods came like clockwork, and the communities simply adapted with elevated housing and drainage. In mountainous areas blanketed by extreme snowfall, people carried on as though sub-zero blizzards were routine. The investigators began to suspect that maybe, just maybe, disaster was a subjective category. Hex summarized this with quiet awe. They appear to be a species that simply treats adversity as part of life. They plan for it, factor it in, and rebuild if needed. Do you realize how rare that is? Meanwhile, the department back home was in collective meltdown. Multiple cross-checking audits were launched. Senior data archaeologist Prix redid an entire 12,000-year historical calibration of Earth, convinced he would find an unlogged cataclysm. He found none. That spurred fresh arguments in the anomaly resolution chamber. The official definition of natural disaster was repeated ad nauseum, a planetary event that causes significant disruption to normal functioning. Could it be that Earth's baseline included these events, so they never truly disrupted? That idea was borderline blasphemous to the more rigid bureaucrats. How could a planet maintain normal functioning in the face of annual hurricanes or weekly earthquakes? The tension soared until Quirt, ever the gelatinous voice of reason, declared, "We need absolute clarity. Investigative team, keep gathering evidence. We will not revise our classification system lightly." On Earth, the team decided they needed a historical perspective, something that would conclusively show how humans perceived large-scale destructive phenomena. They visited libraries, scoured digital archives, consulted historians. They uncovered references to ancient floods that drowned civilizations, volcanic eruptions that blanketed continents in ash, earthquakes that toppled entire cities, storms that ravaged coastlines. All of these events, by cosmic standards, were unbelievably severe. So why were they not in the department's records? It slowly dawned on them that these events certainly existed, but humans called them historical catastrophes only when they exceeded what was considered standard chaos. That threshold was apparently quite high. Smaller scale or more frequent events, things that the department would have labeled disasters, humans just called nature. Laws, famously unshakable amid intergalactic storms, felt unsettled for the first time in his professional life. If any of those events happened on my homeworld, we'd declare a cosmic emergency, he said. Here, it's just one more cycle of weather or geology. How do they cope mentally? Are they collectively in denial? Some Earth historians suggested another possibility. Humans had collectively evolved a sense of both dread and acceptance regarding natural forces. They took steps to prepare, sometimes insufficient, sometimes advanced, but never believed they could fully eradicate the planet's volatility. Instead, their societies integrated it into the routine. If that's the case, Nrop murmured late one evening, flipping through scanned pages of Earth history, we might need to recalibrate how we define the term unexpected planetary event. It seems that Earth dwellers expect everything eventually. In frustration, Nrop wrote a thorough preliminary report and transmitted it to the department, stating their findings and tentatively proposing that Earth's so-called lack of disasters stemmed from the local perspective. To humans, these events were simply part of life's tapestry, rarely called disasters unless of massive magnitude. The response from headquarters was swift and exasperated. One message came through in all caps, a formatting style rarely used in official transmissions. Check your data. This cannot stand. Another demanded a triple verification. Provide a standard meltdown scenario or show the classification is flawed. The investigative team might have found it amusing if it weren't so stressful. Their reputations and the department's entire framework rested on explaining this anomaly. VA, Laz, and Hex all wanted to gather fresh data from a major event. They found a prime candidate, a monstrous hurricane forming in the warm Atlantic waters, predicted to be Category 4 or possibly 5 by landfall. If any single storm would force humans to register a galactic-level disaster, this would be it. They installed themselves in a coastal city, where the storm was projected to wreak the greatest havoc. They monitored local government broadcasts, watched citizens buy supplies, and placed storm shutters over windows. The sense of urgency was real, but it was not panic. Families packed up cars to drive inland if they were in low-lying areas. Others planned to stay put. On the day before landfall, the storm track shifted slightly. Warnings went out, and yet, as the winds began to howl in earnest, the investigators saw neighbors exchanging casual remarks. "Hope your generator's working. Don't forget to bring the pets inside. We've been through worse." These phrases left the team dumbfounded. Huddling in what they believed to be a flimsy shelter, they expected cataclysmic devastation. The hurricane howled, battered the coastline, demolished some structures, flooded the streets, and at one point tore the roof off a community center. But within a day of its passing, rescue operations were underway, repairs began, and the city's daily rhythm was on track to resume. A local radio host even joked about the storm's name, noting it had been all bark and not enough bite. That night, NROP finalized an updated report, this time titled Preliminary Conclusion on Earth's Apparent Lack of Natural Disasters. He wrote that Earth's environment was indeed chaotic, but humans had integrated that chaos into their baseline assumptions. They track storms with sophisticated technology, retrofit buildings for earthquakes, anticipate floods, and landslides seasonally. They do not consider these phenomena as exceeding normal functioning. They perceive them as part of normal functioning. The team awaited the department's response with a blend of dread and a perverse excitement. Weeks crawled by, though Earth time made the wait feel oddly short compared to the sprawling eons of bureaucratic cycles. Finally, a single crisp message arrived. Analysis rejected. Stand by for oversight auditor. Enter Overseer Crisp, an impeccably starched official who teleported in with a retinue of administrative aides. Crisp's entire mission was to disprove the team's conclusion. Crisp demanded site visits, cross-examinations of local authorities, thorough historical cross-checks. The investigators escorted Crisp to Tornado Alley just in time for a swirl of storms to begin forming. Crisp, wearing an expression of faint disgust, kept uttering, "Certainly this must be a cataclysm." But the local people scrambled underground with practiced ease. Then Crisp was flown out to the west coast, where a mid-level earthquake shook the region. Crisp's frustration grew. Why are they not screaming? Why aren't they labeling this as a planet-wide crisis? The investigators shrugged helplessly. Humans they interviewed were polite, but evidently confused by Crisp's line of questions. Don't you consider these storms a horrifying cosmic event? Why would you rebuild here over and over? Isn't that the definition of madness? A weather-beaten older man laughed. This is home. You take the good with the bad. Worst comes to worst, you fix what breaks. Crisp's official data form read inconclusive because Crisp refused to accept the notion that humans simply had a radically different approach to living on a volatile planet. Crisp insisted a deeper conspiracy was at play. Then Crisp found a group of local scientists who, ironically, confirmed everything the investigative team had been saying. One geologist pointed out that Earth's dynamism was integral to its life-supporting systems. Another meteorologist explained that hurricanes, while destructive, also played roles in balancing ocean temperatures and redistributing heat. Crisp's confusion only deepened. So, you need these events? They're beneficial. The meteorologist shrugged. Well, beneficial might be a stretch, but we coexist. Realizing Crisp could not find any standard disaster that matched the department's criteria, the overseer grudgingly retreated to orbit, leaving behind an edict for the investigators. You have one final chance to clarify your conclusion. Then we return to headquarters, and we see if the High Council approves or denies your entire classification. The final push came when they observed a local emergency management drill in a coastal city prone to major storms. It was a calm, orderly procedure. People lined up for informational pamphlets, asked about evacuation routes, made sure to store supplies. A small child raised a hand. Why do grown-ups call them natural disasters if they're just storms or earthquakes that happen all the time? The official leading the drill laughed gently and replied something about damage and disruption. But the question stuck in the minds of the watchers from space. To these humans, the planet's volatility was simply nature's way. They might be upset by the damage it inflicted, but in their collective psyche, it was neither unusual nor unexpected. The last puzzle piece clicked into place. When Crisp reconvened the group that evening, the investigators were ready. They'd compiled centuries of Earth data, seismic charts, storm patterns, historical accounts, each cross-referenced with how humans responded. We see now that by Earth standards, none of these events are unexpected. They only call it a disaster if it surpasses the existing framework of adaptation. On other planets, a fraction of Earth's storms or earthquakes would be cataclysmic because they exceed that population's baseline capacity to adapt. Here, that capacity is far higher. Nrop paused, letting the data glow in the air. Crisp stared, speechless for once. Hex added softly, "You can't label something as exceeding normal functioning if that functioning includes the phenomenon from the outset." In the end, Crisp could only accept the logic. A short message was relayed to the Galactic Records Department. Theory confirmed. Earth events do not meet our standard threshold for natural disasters. Additional classification recommended. The cosmic wheels of bureaucracy turned. Despite initial outrage from many corners, a new consensus began forming. Perhaps the department's definition had been too rigidly universal. Perhaps Earth needed its own category. Type R civilizations would be those that adapted so fully to their planet's volatility that what the department might call a disaster was simply daily life. When the investigative team departed Earth, they felt a mixture of relief and admiration. This was no simple or docile planet. It brimmed with swirling seas, trembling ground, raging winds, all of which humans faced with a mixture of exasperation, dark humor, and stubborn refusal to flee. The team's final transmission soared back to Andromeda, summarizing their fundamental discovery. The humans did not conquer nature. They just declined to call nature's tantrums a reason to panic. They had built entire cultures around expecting the worst and planning for it. Weeks later, they arrived back at headquarters to a swirl of media attention that the department typically avoided. Most staffers were in an uproar, or else quietly enthralled by the story of this weird planet where the usual rules don't apply. Director Quart's gelatinous form rippled with something akin to excitement. "Our committees have decided to file Earth under a newly created subheading of the Master Catalog, Type R. That means they incorporate volatility into their baseline assumptions." A hush followed, broken only by the gentle hum of floating data tablets. Crisp had to sign off on it, which Crisp did with a resigned flourish. It's unprecedented, but apparently necessary. Everyone in that chamber understood the significance. It was no small feat to challenge a universal standard that had remained in place for thousands of years. Yet the evidence was irrefutable. Across the department, new forms had to be created. 400 pages of regulations to define how to categorize a species that just shrugs at storms and rebuilds after quakes without calling them doomsday events. Nrop and the others found themselves invited to endless committees to detail their findings, each session reminiscent of the comedic nightmare of bureaucracy they'd grown to know too well. Yet hidden under the mountain of new forms and subcommittees was a faint sense of amazement. Even the stuffiest archivists were whispering with surprise, a planet that treats cataclysmic events like routine Tuesday troubles. The intangible respect for human resilience mingled with mild dismay at how thoroughly humans broke the department's sense of cosmic order. On Earth, life carried on without the faintest clue that some interstellar records keepers had reevaluated the definitions of disaster because of them. The next hurricane season approached, the next round of wildfires crept across a western region, and the next set of earthquakes rumbled along major fault lines. Humans boarded windows, set up evacuation routes, or simply shrugged at the tremors beneath their feet. The world spun, as it always did, chaotic and vibrant. But in the vast archive of the Andromeda Base Department, Earth's file remained conspicuously empty of official disaster entries. At the end of that empty folder was a single line: classification, Type R, resilience. All events considered baseline normal. In a quiet corner of the department, Crisp approached Nrop after a particularly grueling subcommittee meeting. "I still think it's madness," Crisp admitted, "living with so much risk. No standard Federation protocols for safety or uniform architecture. No mass migrations away from danger zones." "Yes," Nrop agreed, "but we have to respect that they're making it work. They remain on an active planet by choice. They see danger differently than we do." Crisp exhaled, or whatever the equivalent was for Crisp species. "Perhaps we discovered a new dimension to the concept of normal functioning." It's ironically humbling. They parted ways, mindful that the entire taxonomy of disasters would never be the same. As for VA, Laz, and Hex, each quietly compiled personal reflections on their experiences. VA believed the Earth missions had taught her more about geology in a few months than she'd learned in decades, precisely because humans inhabited areas no sane species would ever approach. Laz remained fascinated by the atmospheric extremes, still unable to fathom how a species could watch funnel clouds descend from the sky and simply say, "Well, that's tornado season." Hex, for their part, was left with a simmering admiration. "It's not that they don't fear," Hex explained to a colleague. "They do, but they accept it. They plan for it. They mitigate it. And then they keep living." There was a certain poetry to that. By the time Nrop prepared the final draft of the Earth Report, it was practically a tome in its own right, containing references to centuries of storms, quakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, and their human responses. The conclusion read, "It is not that Earth experiences no disasters. It is that Earth's inhabitants have decided none of these events exceed their definition of normal. We recommend universal recognition of type our civilizations, which are characterized by extraordinary adaptation to a planet's inherent volatility." When he affixed his signature and triple-stamped it for authenticity, he felt the rare sensation of relief. The mission was over. They had done the impossible, changed the course of bureaucratic definitions across galaxies. Back in the main data hall, the shimmering columns of holographic entries shifted as new categories were programmed in. Those who walked by the Earth station found it oddly blank, except for a small note appended in the corner: C-type, our classification. Rumors spread that the cosmic filing system had never encountered so fundamental a revision. People whispered that Earth was effectively the biggest reason for a procedural overhaul in centuries. The comedic aspect was not lost on them. The department prided itself on comprehensively cataloging every cosmic misstep, yet here was a planet that seemed to break the very notion of missteps. It was only fitting, then, that after a concluding ceremony, where the team received half-baked commendations and precisely 2 new official forms to fill out, Nrop and the others found themselves with an unaccustomed sense of pride. For a group of beings who once believed total accuracy in record-keeping was the pinnacle of accomplishment, they discovered a deeper satisfaction in understanding Earth's living spirit. The final departure from headquarters was unceremonious, overshadowed by more pressing department matters, like the scandal of someone wanting to re-alphabetize certain star system indexes. Yet the team left their mark. The new classification took effect immediately, and Earth, ironically, would remain a kind of cosmic curiosity, the place where apparently nothing was a disaster because everything was expected to be somewhat disastrous. If any entity in the galaxy had been watching from a vantage of wry amusement, it would surely note how the humans went about their business, completely unaware that they had rattled the protocols of an advanced bureaucratic organization light years away. Perhaps, in some intangible sense, humans had once again proven their capacity for resilience and reinvention. Or maybe it was just an accident of perspective, that they never sent out the right forms to declare a hurricane or earthquake as cataclysmic. Either way, the unstoppable swirl of Earth's weather continued. More storms brewed in the tropics. More quakes rippled silently beneath the crust. More wildfires sparked in parched forests. Yet the planet's inhabitants did what they always did: adapted, suffered losses, rebuilt, and occasionally partied in the face of adversity. A comedic, courageous refusal to label each event the end. No final announcements, no grand exclamation points, just a quiet entry in the galactic logs. Earth, not listed under standard disasters. Classification updated. Explanation: humans do not consider these events beyond normal functioning. And that, as some cosmic observer might note with a grin, was how an entire civilization managed to keep its record clean, not by avoiding calamities, but by embracing them as part of life. The greatest irony was that for all the illusions of control that other civilizations pursued, humans simply lived. They hammered nails into boards when storms approached, dug deeper foundations for shaky ground, built levees, or occasionally retreated inland for safety. Then they resumed daily life, never filing the official forms that would say, "This is a galactic emergency," because to them, it wasn't. It was simply Tuesday. Even now, in the deepest vaults of the Galactic Records Department, the Earth archives remain a revered curiosity. New staffers flick through them with wonder, half expecting to discover previously hidden cataclysms. They find none. They see only an addendum that reads, "See also Earth's cultural philosophy. The only constant is change." Perhaps that is the simplest explanation of all, the final reason Earth defies the normal categories. While other species recoil in horror at the slightest tremor, Earth's inhabitants smile through the storms, or sigh, or lament the property damage. But they carry on, and in that unimpressed resilience lies the secret that baffled the galaxy's greatest bureaucratic minds for so many millennia.